"You have to get off this plane immediately," she whispered, her fingers trembling against my wrist like a trapped sparrow. I looked up, from the boarding pass stub crumpled in my lap, the one I'd clutched for the last 43 minutes, and met the flight attendant's ice-wide urgent, the color of storm clouds over the tarmac. I didn't move. I couldn't, because if I stood up now, if I let her pull me back down that jet bridge, everything I'd come to say would stay locked inside me forever. The cabin smelled of burnt coffee and recycled air, the kind that clings to your throat like guilt. Around me, passengers shifted in their seats, pretending not to stare. A baby whimpered 3 rows ahead. Somewhere behind me, a man cleared his throat too loudly. The engines were already humming, that low, impatient growl that says the sky is waiting. But I stayed buckled in, my seatbelt cutting a line across the soft cotton of my best navy-dressed one I'd worn to my daughter's graduation, to my mother's funeral, to every moment that mattered. I pressed my palm flat against the armrest, feeling the cool plastic warm beneath my skin, and I shook my head. "No," I said, quiet but steady. "I'm not leaving." She crouched beside me, her name tag glinting Claire, it read, in small silver letters. Her perfume was faint, something like lilacs left too long in water. "Ma'am," she tried again, softer now, "this is a family matter." "Your daughter, my daughter," I cut in, tasting the words like bitter tea, "doesn't get to decide who sits on this flight." Claire's mouth opened, then closed. She glanced toward the cockpit door, then back at me. I could see the war in her face protocol against pity. Finally, she stood, smoothing her skirt with both hands, and walked away. The plane lurched forward. We were taxiing. My heart beat once, hard, against my ribs, like it was trying to escape before I could. I closed my eyes and let the cabin noise swallow me. The click of seatbelts, the rustle of magazines, the soft thud of overhead bins being shut. I'd flown this route 100 times, Atlanta to Seattle, red-eye, always the same window seat, in row 22. I knew the rhythm of it, like I knew the creak in my kitchen floorboards at home. But tonight was different. Tonight, I wasn't going to visit my daughter. I was going to confront her. Let me take you back a little. Before the plane, before the whisper, before the moment everything tilted. My name is Evelyn Harper, though most folks just call me Evie. I'm 62, widowed, 12 years. And I've spent the last 35 of them teaching 3rd grade in a small brick schoolhouse outside Chattanooga. My classroom smelled of chalk dust and apple slices, and every September I'd line the windowsills with mason jars full of wildflowers the kids picked on the walk from the bus. I was good at my job. I was good at being a mother, too. I thought I was. My daughter, Lila, is 37 now. She was always the bright one, the one who asked questions until the teachers ran out of answers. When she was 8, she told me she wanted to be a pilot because the sky doesn't have walls. I laughed and tucked her into bed with the glow-in-the-dark stars stuck to her ceiling. She left for college at 18, came back with a degree in aerospace engineering and a boyfriend named Mark who wore loafers without socks. They moved to Seattle together. I visited twice a year, Thanksgiving, her birthday. I'd bring peach preserves and a new sweater I'd knitted, and she'd hug me too tight, like she was afraid I'd vanish if she let go. My son, Jonah, stayed closer. He's 34, married to a sweet girl named Sarah, who bakes lemon bars that could make a grown man cry. They gave me 2 grandbabies, Clara, who's 6, and missing her front teeth, and Benjamin, 4, who still calls me Mimi because he can't say grandma. Jonah manages the hardware store his daddy started before the cancer took him. Every Sunday, we eat fried chicken at my dining table, the one with the wobbly leg I keep meaning to fix. Sarah sets the good plates, the ones with the tiny blue flowers, and Jonah carves while the kids fight over the wishbone. That's my normal. That's the life I built after Tom Deedsteady. Warm, stitched together with routine and love. Leela's visits grew shorter over the years. Phone calls, too. She'd say work was busy, that Mark traveled for consulting, that she'd call next week. I'd send care packages any Waysacks, because her feet are always cold. A tin of shortbread. A card with a pressed violet from my garden. She'd text a heart emoji. Maybe a photo of the Space Needle at dusk. I told myself it was enough then. 3 months ago, the clues started. It was small things at first. A hesitation in her voice when I asked about Mark. The way she changed the subject when I mentioned coming for Clara's school play. I'd be folding laundry, the dryer humming like a distant bee. And I'd catch myself staring at the phone, waiting for it to ring. It never did. The real crack came in July. I was at the Piggly Wiggly, reaching for a carton of Half when I saw Eta magazine rack, one of those glossy tabloid things nobody admits to reading. The cover screamed in red. Tech heiress's secret wedding who's the mystery groom. And there, blurred but unmistakable, was Lila, my Lila, in a silk gown the color of champagne, laughing into the lens while a man's arm circled her waist. Not Mark's arm. This man was taller, darker, with a jawline sharp enough to cut glass. The caption said the wedding was last weekend, in Fiji. I stood there in aisle 7, milk, sweating in my hand, and felt the floor tilt. The cashier had to call my name twice before I moved. That night, I called her. Straight to voicemail. I left a message I thought, sweetheart. I saw something today. Call me when you can. She didn't. 3 days later, a text. So sorry mom, crazy week. Will explain soon. Love you. Explain. Like it was a dentist appointment she'd forgotten. I waited. I baked, I graded papers until my eyes burned. I told myself, daughters keep secrets. I told myself I was overreacting. But the magazine sat on my kitchen counter like a bruise I couldn't stop pressing. Then, 2 weeks ago, Sarah Sweet. Unsuspecting Sarah mentioned over coffee that Lila had asked her to babysit the kids for a long weekend in August. She said she and Mark are renewing their vows, Sarah said, stirring sugar into her cup. Isn't that romantic? Renewing vows, with a man who wasn't in the Fiji photo. I smiled. I nodded. I went home and booked the red-eye to Seattle. I didn't tell anyone. Not Jonah, not Sarah, not even my sister Ruth, who can smell drama like a bloodhound. I packed light-tone carry-on, my navy dress, the pearl earrings Tom gave me on our 25th anniversary. I left a note on the fridge, gone to visit Lila. Back Monday. Water the ferns. At the airport, I moved through security like a ghost. The TSA agent stamped my boarding pass without looking up. I bought a coffee I didn't drink. I sat at gate C14 and watched families reunite, daughters running into mothers' arms, fathers lifting toddlers high enough to touch the ceiling. I waited for my row to be called. And then Claire appeared. Kneeling, whispering, pleading. But I stayed. The plane lifted off. And Atlanta fell away beneath us lights like scattered pearls. The Chattahoochee, a dark ribbon winding through the city. I pressed my forehead to the window and felt the glass vibrate against my skin. 35,000 feet up, there was no turning back. I didn't know what I'd say when I saw her. I didn't know if I'd cry or scream, or simply stand there, silent. Until she explained why her life had become a headline I wasn't invited to read. But I knew one thing for certain. Some truths you can't unsee. And some daughters don't get to hide behind oceans and excuses anymore. The seatbelt sign dinged off. Claire walked past again, her eyes flicking to mine, then away. I unbuckled, stood, and smoothed my dress. My legs were steady. My heart was not. I was coming, Lila, whether you wanted me to or not. The cabin lights dimmed to that bruised purple glow they use for red eyes, the kind that makes everyone look half dead. I kept my reading light on, a small circle of gold around the magazine I wasn't reading. Page 47 was stuck to page 48 with a smear of someone else's lipstick. I peeled them apart and stared at the perfume ad some actress pouting under a waterfall of diamonds. I wondered if Lila had ever worn perfume like that, or if she still used the same drugstore vanilla body spray she'd stolen from my dresser at 15. Claire came by again with the beverage cart. Her smile was professional, but the corners trembled. "Anything I can get you, ma'am?" she asked, voice pitched low so the man snoring in to be wouldn't wake. "Water, please. No ice." My throat felt lined with sandpaper. She filled a plastic cup, set it on my tray, then hesitated. "Your daughter, she's meeting you at arrivals." I met her eyes. "She doesn't know I'm coming." Claire's fingers tightened on the cart handle. Family surprises can be complicated. She glanced at the wedding ring I still wore, Tom's plain gold band, worn thin at the edges. My mom showed up unannounced once. Thought I was failing out of nursing school. Turns out, I'd just stopped answering her calls because I was ashamed of how much I missed home. She gave a small, sad laugh. We didn't speak for 6 hours. Then we ate pancakes at 3 a.m. and cried into the syrup. I took the water. "Thank you, Claire." She moved on. I sipped. The water tasted metallic, like pennies left in rain, across the aisle. A teenage boy was sketching on a napkin, dragons, maybe, or airplanes. Hard to tell in the half-light. His headphones leaked tinny guitar. I watched his pencil scratch and thought of Lila at that age, sprawled on the living room rug with colored pencils, drawing constellations she'd invented herself. "That one's the teapot of forgiveness," she'd say, pointing to a lopsided cluster. "When you mess up, you pour out the bad feelings and start fresh." I'd ruffle her hair and tell her she was wiser than her third-grade teacher. She'd believed me. The first real clutha, one that turned suspicion into sickness, came the week after the magazine. I was at Jonah's for Sunday dinner. Sarah had made pot roast. The kitchen smelled of rosemary and slow-cooked onions. Clara was showing me her loose tooth, wiggling it with a sticky finger, when my phone buzzed on the table. Unknown number, Seattle area code. I let it ring out. 30 seconds later, a voicemail notification. I excused myself to the porch. The evening was thick with cicadas. I pressed play. "Mrs. Harper, this is Dr. Patel, from Swedish Medical Center. We have you listed as Lila Whitmore's emergency contact. She was admitted this morning, dehydration, possible early miscarriage. She's stable, but she asked us not to call you." I'm calling anyway. "She's in room 412 if you need to reach her." The porch swing creaked as I sat down hard. Miscarriage. Lila hadn't told me she was pregnant. Hadn't told me she was trying. Hadn't told me anything. I played the message again, searching for the sound of my daughter's voice in the background. There was none. just the soft bustle of a hospital hallway and Dr. Patel's careful kindness. I didn't call back. I went inside, washed dishes with Sarah, laughed when Benjamin smeared mashed potatoes on his forehead like war paint. I smiled until my cheeks ached. That night, I lay awake listening to the grandfather clock in the hallway tick, tick, tick like a heartbeat I wasn't sure was mine anymore. 2 days later, Lila finally called. It was 11:47 p.m. The caller ID lit up my bedroom like a flare. Mom. Her voice was small, scraped, raw. I'm sorry I missed your calls. I sat up, clutching the phone with both hands. I heard you were in the hospital. Silence. Then, who told you? A doctor, Patel. Another silence, longer. I heard her breathe the shaky inhale, the kind you take when you're trying not to cry. It was early, she said finally. Barely 7 weeks. I didn't want to tell you until I knew it would stick. 7 weeks. That put conception sometime in June, the same month as the Fiji wedding. My skin went cold. And Mark? I asked. Does he know? She hesitated. Mark and we're separated. Have been since April. The room tilted. I pressed my back to the headboard, feeling the cool wood through my nightgown. Separated, I repeated. The word tasted like rust. It's complicated, she said quickly. I didn't want to burden you. You've had enough loss. Loss. As if Tom's death was a suitcase I still carried, not a hole I'd learned to walk around. Lila, I said. I'm your mother. I know. Her voice cracked. I'm handling it. Please, Mom, I'll call soon. I promise. She hung up before I could ask about the man in the magazine. I stared at the phone for a long time. Then I opened my laptop and bought the plane ticket. Now, somewhere over Nebraska, the plane hit turbulence. The cabin lurched. Overhead bins rattled. A collective gasp rippled through the seats. I gripped the armrests, knuckles white. Claire's voice came over the intercom.com as Sunday morning. Folks, just a little bump. We'll be through it in a minute. The lights flickered. My water sloshed, soaking the magazine. The perfume ad bled into a watercolor mess. I closed my eyes and pictured Lila at 7 weeks pregnant, maybe queasy over the toilet. Maybe standing in a drugstore aisle, holding a tiny onesie she'd never buy. I pictured her alone. I pictured her not alone, with someone whose name I didn't know. The plane leveled. A baby started crying again. I unbuckled and stood, knees creaking like old floorboards. Claire was 2 rows ahead, comforting a woman whose rosary had spilled across the floor. I waited until she looked up. I need to use the restroom, I said. She nodded, stepping aside. I walked the narrow aisle, past sleeping strangers, past the curtain that separates coach from the promised land of legroom. The lavatory was occupied. I leaned against the wall and studied my reflection in the darkened galley window. My hair had come loose from its bungray strands, curling like smoke. My eyes were red-rimmed, but steady. I looked like a woman who'd made up her mind. When the door opened, I slipped inside. The space was barely big enough to turn around. I locked the door, leaned over the sink, and let the tears come silent, hot, tasting of recycled air and burnt coffee. I cried for the baby that wasn't, for the marriage that wasn't, for the daughter who'd built a life I wasn't allowed to touch. I cried until my ribs hurt. Then I splashed cold water on my face, patted it dry with a paper towel that smelled of bleach, and opened the door. Claire was waiting. She didn't speak, just handed me a fresh cup of water. No ice and a blanket that still held the warmth of the cart's heating pad. I took them both. 4 hours to Seattle, she said softly. I nodded. Plenty of time to decide what I'm going to say. She squeezed my arm once, gentle, then moved on. I returned to my seat. The teenage artist had fallen asleep. His napkin dragon had fluttered to the floor. I picked it up, smoothed it against my thigh, and tucked it into my purse. A souvenir, maybe. Or evidence that even in the air, people still make things with their hands. The plane droned on. I pulled the blanket to my chin and closed my eyes. In the darkness behind my lids, I saw Leela's face round-cheeked at 8, sharp-cheeked at 18, blurred and laughing on a magazine cover. I saw her standing in an airport arrivals hall, looking for Mark, not expecting me. I saw myself walking toward her, navy dress wrinkled, heart in my throat, carrying nothing but the truth and 37 years of love. I didn't sleep. I waited. The wheels touched down with a jolt that rattled my teeth. Seatbelt signs blinked off. The cabin filled with the shuffle of coats and the metallic clatter of buckles. I stayed seated, letting the rush pass me like water around a stone. My carry-on was still in the overheadsmal navy, the zipper pole-shaped like a silver acorn. I'd packed it the way I pack everything: 1 sweater, 2 pairs of underwear, the photograph of Tom holding newborn Leela on his bare chest. Essentials. Claire appeared at my row. Safe travels, Mrs. Harper. Her voice carried the weight of everything unsaid. I nodded, throat tight, and stood. The jet bridge smelled of jet fuel and wet carpet. I walked slow, letting younger legs surge past. My knees protested, but I kept my chin high. At baggage claim, the carousel hadn't started. Families clustered around it, like birds at a feeder. I found a bench near the exit, sat, and opened my purse. The napkin dragon was creased, but intact. I smoothed it again, then tucked it into the side pocket next to my boarding pass. My phone buzzed. A text from Jonah. Clara lost her other front tooth. Sarah says you owe her a quarter from the tooth fairy. Call when you land. I smiled, despite everything, thumbs hovering. I typed, tell her, Mimi's bringing something better than a quarter. Love you. I didn't mention where I was. Another Boots on Noun Seattle number. My pulse skipped. I let it ring to voicemail, then listened. Mom, it's me. Leela's voiceathin, hurried. The way it got when she was 12 and late for curfew. I saw you checked in for the flight. Please don't come to the house. I'll meet you at the airport. Terminal coffee shop, the one by the sculpture. Half an hour, I can explain. The message ended. I stared at the screen until it dimmed. She'd been tracking my flight. Of course she had engineer, always 3 steps ahead. I felt a flicker of pride, then a sharper stab of hurt. Half an hour. Enough time to rehearse, to build walls. I stood. The carousel groaned to life. Suitcases tumbled out like secrets. I didn't wait for minute, didn't have one. I followed the signs to ground transportation, then changed my mind. I needed air. I pushed through the sliding doors into the Seattle morning, cool, damp, smelling of salt and espresso. The sky was the color of Tom's old work shirts. Faded, but still holding shape. I found the coffee shop Lila meant. A small kiosk wedged between a newsstand and a bronze sculpture of a salmon leaping upstream. The barista wore a knit cap despite the mild weather. I ordered a drip, black, and took it to a standing table near the window. My reflection stared back, gray hair escaping its pins, eyes puffy, but determined. I looked like a woman who'd flown through the night to ask questions she might not want answered. Lila arrived 23 minutes later. I saw her before she saw metal, still favoring her left knee from the soccer injury senior year. She wore jeans and a navy peacoat I didn't recognize, hair twisted into a knot that looked slept on. Her face was thinner, cheekbones sharper, but the way she scanned the crowd was pure Leela. Methodical, cataloging exits. She spotted me. Her step faltered. Then she squared her shoulders and walked over. Mom. She stopped a foot away, hands buried in her pockets. You look tired. I set my cup down. I am. She glanced around. No Mark, no mystery groom, just strangers scrolling phones. Can we sit? I gestured to the only empty table, 2 stools bolted to the floor. We sat. The salmon sculpture glinted behind her, mid-leap, forever trying. Lila wrapped both hands around her own coffee oat milk latte, extra foam, same as college. Some things don't change. I should have told you, she started. About the separation. About everything. Start with Fiji, I said. My voice came out steadier than I felt. She flinched. You saw the magazine. I saw my daughter on the cover of a tabloid getting married to a man whose name I don't know. She looked down, steam curled between us. His name is Daniel Chen. We met at a conference in Singapore last year. He's kind. He listens. She swallowed. Mark stopped listening a long time ago. The words landed like stones in still water. I waited for the ripples to settle. When did Mark stop listening? 2 years ago. 3. It was slow. He traveled more. I worked late. We stopped fighting because we stopped talking. She traced the rim of her cup. I found out he was seeing someone in Denver. A coworker. He said it was nothing. I believed him, until I didn't. I thought of Mark's easy grin at Thanksgiving. The way he'd lift Clara onto his shoulders, so she could hang the star on the tree. I thought of the Christmas card they'd sent last year, both of them smiling in matching red sweaters, Lila's hand on his chest like it belonged there, and the baby. I asked, her eyes filled. Danya's. We weren't trying it, just happened. I was going to tell you after the first trimester. Then, she pressed a fist to her mouth. Then I started bleeding at work. I drove myself to the ER. I didn't call anyone. I couldn't. The terminal noise, FADETH announcements, the suitcase wheels, the laughter of a family greeting grandma. There was only Lila's trembling chin and the salmon frozen midair. I'm sorry, she whispered. I thought if I kept it contained, it wouldn't hurt you. I reached across the table and covered her hand with mine. Her skin was cold. Lila Grace, nothing about you is contained. You're my daughter. Your hurt is my hurt. She turned her hand palm up, lacing our fingers. Daniel wanted to meet you. I said no. I was ashamed. Ashamed of what? Of failing. Of needing you when I swore I didn't. A tear slipped down her cheek. She didn't wipe it away. I married him in Fiji because it was quiet. No expectations. Just us and a judge who smelled like plumage. I wore a dress I bought off the rack. It was peaceful. Peaceful. The word stung. I'd imagined cows, paparazzi, champagne, a gown with a train long enough to trip the groom. Instead, my daughter had chosen silence, and Mark. I asked. He knows about Daniel. He's angry. He wants the house. She gave a brittle laugh. He says I breached the prenup by abandoning the marital domicile. His lawyer sent papers last week. I felt the old teacher instinct rise, wanting to march to the principal, demand fairness. I tamped it down. "What do you want, Leela?" She looked at me then, really looked. "I want to stop running. I want to come home for Sunday dinner, and let Clara show me her missing teeth. I want you to meet Daniel, without me hiding behind excuses." Her voice cracked. "I want my mom." The barista called an order. Someone's child laughed. I squeezed her hand. "Then, let's start there." She nodded, tears falling freely now. I pulled a napkin from the dispenser, thin, cheap, printed, with tiny coffee cup sand, dabbed her cheeks the way I did when she was 5, and fell off her bike. She let me. We sat like that until our coffees were cold. Then I said, "Take me to your house. I want to see where you live now." She hesitated. "It's a mess. Boxers everywhere." "Daniel's at work, I've seen messes," I said. "I raised you and Jonah through the chickenpox winter of '98. Boxers don't scare me." She laughed, a real one, watery but genuine. "Okay. But fair warning, the couch is ugly. I'll survive." We stood. She shouldered her bag. I took my carry-on. As we walked toward short-term parking, she slipped her arm through mine like she did when she was little, and the world felt too big. Her coat smelled of cedar and rain. In the Kara Sensible hybrid I didn't recognize, ish, handed me the keys to the aux cord. "Pick something," she said. No judgment. I scrolled her phone, landed on Billie Holiday. "I'll be seeing you." The saxophone filled the small space, warm and worn. Lila backed out of the spot, wipers swiping at a mist that wasn't quite rain. We didn't speak. We didn't need to. The city slid past wet pavement, coffee shops, a ferry cutting white across the sound. I watched her profile, the way her thumb tapped the steering wheel, in time with the music. She was still my girl, just older, bruised, trying. Halfway to her neighborhood, she said, "Mom, thank you for not getting off the plane." I reached over and tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear. "Some flights, you don't not until you know where you're landing." She smiled, mal-tentative, but there. The road curved toward home, whatever shape it was taking now. Leela's house sat on a quiet street in Ballard, the kind where maple leaves collect in the gutters and every porch light flickers on at dusk. It was a narrow 2-story craftsman, paint the color of sage after rain. The lawn needed mowing. A single bicycle leaned against the railing, front wheel bent like it had lost a fight with a curb. I liked it, immediately impert, breathing. She parked in the driveway behind a silver pickup I assumed was Daniel's. The engine ticked as it cooled. Lila cut the music, and Billie's voice faded into the soft hush of sprinklers somewhere down the block. "Welcome to chaos," she said, grabbing my carry-on from the back seat. Her shoulders were hunched, like she was bracing for judgment. I followed her up the steps. The key stuck in the lock. She jiggled it twice before the door swung in. The foyer smelled of sawdust and lemon polish, the scent of a house mid-metamorphosis. Moving boxes lined the hallway. Some sealed, some yawning open books, picture frames. A tangle of Christmas lights that would never untangle itself. "Daniel's trying to fix the built-ins," she explained, kicking a stray sock aside. "He thinks if he sands enough, the past will plane itself smooth." I set my purse on a bench that wobbled under the weight. "Men and their projects." She laughed, a small puff of air, and led me into the living room. The couch was indeed ugly mustard yellow, sagging in the middle like it had given up on life. But someone had draped a quilt over it. The same log cabin pattern I'd taught Leela to piece when she was 16. My throat tightened. "Tea?" she asked. "Please." The kitchen was brighter white cabinets, a farmhouse sink, a window over the sink framing a dogwood just beginning to turn. A kettle sat on the stove, the enamel chipped in one spot like a missing tooth. Lila filled it, set it to boil, then leaned against the counter, arms crossed. "Daniel gets home around 6, she said. "He texted, he's bringing pho. Enough for 3. I nodded, running a finger along the grain of the oak table. Someone had carved initials into the corner L plus D, the D still fresh, the L worn soft. I traced them and felt the years collapse. Leela, at the kitchen table in Chattanooga, carving her name into my picnic bench with a butter knife. I'd scolded her then. Now I wanted to sand the table myself, keep the mark safe. The kettle whistled. She poured water over chamomile, the steam curling between us like incense. We took our mugs to the couch. She curled her feet beneath her, the way she did when she was little and needed to feel small. "Tell me about the miscarriage," I said gently. She stared into her tea. I was at work, standing in a meeting about thrust vectors, of all things. Felt a cramp, then warmth down my leg. I excused myself, drove to the hospital with the hazard lights on. They did an ultrasound, heart gone, just gone. Her voice cracked on the last word. I sat in the parking garage afterward and screamed until my throat bled. Then I went home and packed Mark's suits into boxes. I set my mug down, reached for her hand. "Why didn't you call me?" "I was ashamed," she whispered. "Of the mess. Of needing you to fix it when I'm supposed to be the adult." I pulled her into my lap the way I hadn't since she was 9 and afraid of thunderstorms. She resisted for half a second, then folded, her head on my shoulder, tears soaking the collar of my dress. I stroked her hair still baby fine, at the temple sand, rocked the way I used to when colic kept us both awake. "You're always my child," I murmured. "Messes don't come with expiration dates." We stayed like that until the quilt slipped to the floor. Outside, a neighbor's dog barked once, then thought better of it. Leela's breathing evened out. She didn't sleep, but she rested. Eventually, she sat up, wiping her face with the sleeve of her coat. "Daniel's different," she said. "He asks questions. Not to fix, just to understand." When I told him about the baby, he held me and said, "We'll try again when you're ready. Or we won't. Either way, I'm here. No pressure. No timeline." I thought of Tom, how he'd rub my feet after parent-teacher nights without being asked. How some men speak love in silences. "He sounds steady." "He is." She hesitated. "Mark called yesterday. Wants to meet. Says he has papers for me too, sigsamathing, about the house." I told him I'd think about it. The front door opened with a soft click. A man stepped in tall, broad-shouldered, carrying 2 plastic bags that smelled of star anise and lime. His hair was damp from the mist. He wore a navy Henley pushed to the elbows, forearms dusted with sawdust. He paused when he saw me, surprise flickering across his face, then something warmer. "You must be Evelyn," he said, setting the bags on the counter. His voice was low, Pacific Northwest calm. "Lila said, you have her eyes." I stood. "And you must be Daniel." He crossed the room, wiped his hand on his jeans, then offered it. His grip was firm but careful, like he knew grandmother's bones could surprise you. "I'd hug you, but I'm covered in wood glue. I've survived worse." Lila watched us, arms wrapped around herself. Daniel glanced at her, a silent question. She nodded. He turned back to me. I'm glad you're here, he said. She's been carrying this alone too long. The honesty of it unsettled me, like sunlight after weeks of rain. I nodded, unsure what to say. He unpacked the F3 cartons, extra basil, a sleeve of chopsticks. Leela found bowls in a box labeled kitchen fragile. We ate at the wobbly table, steam fogging the window. Daniel told me about growing up in Tacoma. His mom's kimchi that could clear sinuses at 10 paces. I told him about teaching 3rd grade, how Clara's missing teeth reminded me of Lila at that age. Lila listened, chopsticks hovering, eyes moving between us like she was watching a tennis match she'd bet on. After dinner, Daniel cleared the table. Lila excused herself to shower. I smell like airport, she said. The pipes groaned overhead. Daniel and I stood at the sink, him washing, me drying with a towel that smelled faintly of lavender. She told you about Mark? He asked quietly. He scrubbed a bowl harder than necessary. He's contesting the separation. Says she abandoned the marriage. Wants the house, the dog, half her 401k. His lawyer's aggressive. I folded the towel. And you? I want her happy. The rest is noise. He glanced upstairs, where the shower had stopped. I'm not trying to replace anyone, Evelyn. Not Tom. Not even the idea of what she had. I just want to be part of what comes next. I studied his hand calloused, steady, the kind that could build or hold, depending on what was needed. You love her, I do. Simple. No poetry, just fact. Upstairs, a door opened. Lila's footsteps padded across the hall. Daniel dried his hands. Guest rooms, the first door on the left. Fresh sheets. I'll take the couch. I'm not displacing anyone. You're not. I insist. He smiled, the kind that reached his eyes. Besides, the couch is ugly but surprisingly comfortable. I laughed, actually laughed, the sound surprising us both. Lila appeared in the doorway, hair damp, wearing an old NASA t-shirt that hung to her knees. She looked younger, softer. Everything okay? She asked. Perfect, I said. She crossed to Daniel, slipped her arms around his waist from behind. He covered her hands with his. The three of us stood in the small kitchen, the dogwood tapping the window like it wanted in. For the first time since the magazine rack in aisle 7, I felt the ground steady beneath me. Later, in the guest room, I unpacked my carry-on. The photograph of Tom and baby Lila went on the nightstand. I changed into my nightgown, brushed my teeth with a toothbrush still in its drugstore plastic. The bed was firm, the sheets cool. I lay awake, listening to the house, settle pipes, ticking. Daniel's low murmur downstairs. Lila's lighter steps overhead. My phone buzzed. A text from Markunknown, but familiar area code. Heard, you're in Seattle. We need to talk. Tomorrow, coffee. I'll send address. I stared at the screen until it dimmed. Then I turned it face down. Tomorrow would come soon enough. I woke to the smell of coffee and the soft clink of a spoon against ceramic. Sunlight leaked through the lace curtains, striping the quilt in pale gold. For a moment I forgot where I wastened. The photograph on the nightstand brought it back. Tom's tired smile, Lila's tiny fist curled against his chest. I sat up, knees creaking, and reached for my robe. Downstairs, Daniel stood at the stove, flipping pancakes. He wore the same Henley, now flecked with batter. Leela sat at the table in flannel pajama pants, hair in a messy knot, scrolling her phone with one hand and cradling a mug with the other. The scene was so ordinary, it ached. "Morning," I said. Leela looked up. Eyes still puffy from sleep or crying. I couldn't tell which. "Coffee's fresh. Pancakes in 2 minutes." Daniel slid a plate across the table, 3 perfect circles, edges crisp. "Blueberry," he said. Lila said, "They're your weakness." They were. I took the chair beside her. The table had been steadied overnight. A folded magazine now propped one leg. We ate in easy quiet, the only sounds forks scraping and the occasional slurp. Daniel poured orange juice into jelly-jar glasses. Lila added too much syrup, the way she did at 10. Halfway through, my phone buzzed against the wood. Mark, again. "Blue bottle on first. 10 a.m., don't make me wait." I silenced it. Lila noticed. "Everything okay?" "Mark wants to meet." I kept my voice level. "Says it's about papers." She set her fork down. "I'll come with you." "No." The word came out, sharper than I meant. I softened. "This is between him and me first. You've carried enough." Daniel cleared his throat. "I can drive you. Or wait outside. Whatever you need." I looked at Themidaughter, fragile but upright. This man, who'd sanded shelves and cooked breakfast without being asked. I felt the old instinct to protect, to shield, but also something new. Trust. "I'll take the bus," I said. "I need the walk afterward." Leela started to protest. I touched her wrist. "Let me do this part alone. Then we'll talk all of us." She nodded, reluctant. Daniel refilled my coffee without comment. At 9:15, I stood in the guest room, smoothing my navy dress in the mirror. The hem had a small snag from the plane. I tucked it under. I pinned my hair, slipped Tom's ring from my right hand to my left closer to my heart, farther from conversation. In the bathroom I brushed my teeth, rinsed with the minty toothpaste that tasted like hotel mornings. I looked 62 and every minute of it. Lila walked me to the door. "Call me when you're done," she said. "I'll be here." Daniel handed me an umbrella. "Rain's coming." I took it. On the porch I paused, breathing in the damp green smell of the Pacific Northwest. The bicycle was gone. Daniel must have moved it. I walked to the bus stop at the corner, heels clicking on wet pavement. The 44 came within minutes. I climbed aboard, dropped my fare into the slot, and took a seat near the back. The city rolled past. Coffee shops, murals, a man walking a 3-legged dog. I watched it all like a tourist in my own daughter's life. Blue Bottle was crowded, the line snaking past pastry cases. Mark stood near the pickup counter, arms crossed, wearing the same navy blazer he'd worn to Jonah's wedding. His hair had thinned. Worry lines etched deeper around his eyes. When he saw me, his face cycled through surprise, then something harder. "Evie," he didn't hug me. "You look..." Well, I didn't smile. "Let's sit." We found a small table by the window. Rain started, soft at first, then harder, streaking the glass. Mark ordered nothing. I kept my coffee from home, now cold, in a paper cup. He slid a manila folder across the table. "Separation agreement. She gets the furniture, I keep the house. She waives spousal support. Standard." I opened the folder. Legal jargon blurred. I closed it. "You're fighting for a house she doesn't want." She left. His voice was tight. "Walked out. That's abandonment." She walked out of a marriage that stopped existing years ago. I kept my tone even. "You both did." He leaned forward. "You don't know what it was like. The late nights, the fights about kids we never had. You had a child on the way," I said quietly. She lost it alone while you were in Denver with someone else. His jaw clenched. That's not fair, I finished. No. But neither is pretending this is about furniture. He looked away, rain reflecting in his eyes. I loved her, Evie. I just lost the map. I felt a pang not for him, but for the boy who used to carry Lila on his shoulders at county fairs. Love isn't a map, Mark. It's a compass. You stopped checking north. Silence stretched. A barista called an order for large cap, extra foam. Mark rubbed his temples. I don't want to hurt her, he said finally. I just want closure, then give it. I pushed the folder back. Sign the house over. Let her keep the dog. Walk away clean. He stared at the folder like it might bite. And if I don't? I met his eyes. Then you'll drag this through court, spend thousands, and lose anyway. Because I'll be there every day. And Jonah, and Sarah, and every person who watched you promise forever in front of God and a blueberry cake. My voice didn't shake. You'll lose Mark, and you'll lose her twice. He swallowed. The rain pounded now, drumming the window like impatient fingers. I'll think about it, he said. Do more than think. I stood. Sign it. Mail it to her lawyer. Then leave my daughter alone. I left him there. Folder unopened. Coffee untouched. Outside, the umbrella bloomed like a dark flower. I walked 3 blocks before the tears came not for Mark, but for the years wasted. The baby that never drew breath, the way love can curdle if you stop stirring. The bus back was nearly empty. I sat in the same seat, watching the city blur. My phone buzzed. Leela. You okay? I typed, on my way. Bring tissues. At the house. Daniel opened the door before I knocked. Lila stood behind him, eyes red. I stepped inside, closed the umbrella, and let them fold me into the space between them. The quilt from the couch was draped over the banister. Someone had started a fire in the small hearth. The room smelled of wood smoke and vanilla. Tell me, Lila said. I did every word, every flinch of Mark's face. When I finished, she sagged against Daniel. He held her up without effort. I'll call my lawyer, she said. If he signs, he will, I said. He's tired too. We moved to the living room. Daniel poured Tureel tea from a pot with honey on the side. We sat on the ugly couch, 3 abreast, knees touching. Outside, the rain eased to a drizzle. Lila leaned her head on my shoulder. I kept thinking, she said, if I fixed it fast enough, you'd never have to know how broken I was. I kissed her temple. Broken things let the light in. Daniel reached across her lap and took my hand. His palm was warm, calloused, steady. Stay the week, he said. There's a spare room. And I make a decent lasagna. I looked at Themi, daughter, bruised but healing. This man who'd chosen her anyway. I thought of Jonah's kitchen, Clara's missing teeth, the ferns waiting to be watered. I thought of the long flight home, the empty seat beside me. I'll stay, I said. But only if you let me cook tomorrow. I brought peach preserves. Lila laughed through tears. Deal. The fire crackled. Somewhere in the walls, the house settled like an old dog finding its spot. I closed my eyes and felt the weight of the day lift, feather by feather. The next morning I awoke before the house. The guest room clock glowed 5:47 in soft red numbers. I lay still, listening to the quiet, the refrigerator's low hum, a single drip in the bathroom sink, the faint rustle of leaves against the window. I slipped from bed, pulled on yesterday's slacks and a cardigan, and padded downstairs in sock feet. The kitchen was dim, lit only by the stove's nightlight. I found the coffee maker, measured grounds, by feel 3 scoops. The way Tom always didn't set it to brew. While it gurgled, I opened the fridge. Eggs, half and half, a sad bunch of spinach. In the pantry, flour, sugar, a jar of peaches I recognized from my own canning labels. Someone, Leela probably, had brought my suitcase in from the porch. I rolled up my sleeves and started biscuit dough. The way my mother taught me, cold butter cut in with a fork, buttermilk poured slow. The motion was muscle memory, soothing as prayer. By the time the oven preheated, the kitchen smelled of rising yeast and possibility. Footsteps on the stairs. Daniel appeared in pajama bottoms and a faded U-t-shirt. Hair sticking up like a boy's. He stopped in the doorway, sniffed, and smiled. "Your trouble," he said. "Only the good kind." I slid the biscuit tray into the oven. "Coffee's ready." He poured 2 mugs, handed me one without asking how I took it black. Always. We leaned against opposite counters, sipping in silence. The rain had stopped. Pale light crept through the dogwood, striping the floor in shifting bars. "Lila still asleep?" I asked, out cold. "She didn't sleep much before you came." He rotated the mug in his hands. "Nightmares. Or guilt. Hard to tell." I nodded, throat tight. "She carry it a while. But she's strong. She is." He paused. "Mark texted her at 2 a.m. Said he signed the papers. Dropped them at her lawyer's office before they opened." The biscuit timer dinged. I pulled them out, golden, puffed, perfect. "Good," I said. One less wait. We ate at the table. Biscuits, split and steaming. Peach preserves, spooned on like sunshine. Lila wandered down at 7:30, eyes puffy, wearing Daniel's robe. She took one look at the spread and started crying again, quiet, shoulders shaking. I stood, wrapped her in flour-dusted arms, and let her soak the cardigan. "I'm sorry," she mumbled into my neck. "Nothing to be sorry for, baby. Eat." She did. We all did. The kitchen filled with the small sounds of morning, forks clinking, the scrape of a chair, Daniel humming under his breath while he refilled juice. When the plates were empty, Leela pushed hers away. "I want to call Jonah," she said. "Tell him everything. No more half-truths." I reached for her hand. "He'll be angry at Mark, at the situation. Not at you." She nodded, dialed on speaker. Sarah answered on the second ring. "Mimi." Clara's voice, bright and toothless. "Are you coming home today? Soon, sweetheart? Is your daddy there?" Shuffling, then Jonah. "Mom, you okay?" Lila took a breath. "It's me, Joe. I need to tell you some things." She did, voice steady, tears falling. The separation, the miscarriage, Daniel, the tabloid wedding. Jonah listened without interrupting. When she finished, silence stretched so long, I heard the kitchen clock tick. Finally, "You should have called me, Lee. I know. I'm booking a flight. Sarah, and the kids too. We're coming up." Leela's eyes met mine, wide. "You don't have to. We're family," he said simply. "Family shows up." He hung up. Leela stared at the phone, then laughed, shaky, incredulous. Daniel squeezed her shoulder. By noon, the house was chaos in the best way. I'd sent Daniel to the store for lasagna fixings. Lila unpacked boxes labeled photos, spreading memories across the living room rug. I found one of her, at 6, gap-toothed, holding a trophy for spelling bee. Another of Mark and Jonah at 17, arms slung around each other, sunburned from a lake trip. I set them side by side on the mantel. Jonah's family arrived at 4, tumbling through the door like a small hurricane. Clara launched herself at Leela Auntie Lee. You live in a treehouse. While Benjamin clung to my leg, shy. Sarah hugged me hard, whispering, "Thank you for going to her." We cooked together 6 adults in a kitchen built for 2. Sauce simmered, noodles boiled. Clara stirred salad with a spoon bigger than her head. Daniel lifted Benjamin to grate cheese. Jonah opened wine. The dogwood outside lost its last light. Inside, the table stretched with every leaf inserted, mismatched chairs dragged from every room. We ate until we groaned. Stories spilled, Jonah teasing Lila about her college haircut, Sarah recounting Clara's first attempt at riding a bike. Daniel told about the time he tried to propose on a ferry and dropped the ring overboard. Lila rescued it with a fishing net borrowed from a stranger. Laughter bounced off the walls, warm and loud. After dessert, my peach cobbler, vanilla ice cream melting into Riversmark's name came up. Jonah's jaw tightened. He's out of her life, I said. Papers signed. House stays with Lila and Daniel. Jonah nodded, slow. Good. Later, the kids fell asleep on the ugly couch under the log cabin quilt. Sarah and Jonah took the guest room. Daniel inflated an air mattress in the office. Lila and I washed dishes side by side, the way we did when she was home from college, and the world still felt fixable. I keep waiting to wake up, she said, scrubbing a pan. Like this is too good. It's not a dream, I said. It's a beginning. She set the pan in the rack, turned to me. Stay another week. Help me unpack. Meet Daniel's mom. She's driving up from Tacoma tomorrow. I dried my hands on the lavender towel. I've got ferns to water and a classroom to open in 10 days. But I'll stay till Sunday. Then you come home for Labor Day. Bring Daniel. Clara wants to show him her tree fort. Leela's eyes filled again. Okay. We stood there, water dripping from the faucet, the house quiet except for the soft snore of a I thought of the plane, Claire's trembling hand, the magazine in aisle 7. I thought of Mark's defeated shoulders in the coffee shop. None of it felt like victory, only like the turning of a page. Upstairs, I unpacked the last of my carry-on, the napkin dragon from the flight. I taped it to the guest room mirror, wings spread mid-soar. A reminder that even paper can carry you somewhere. Sunday came too fast. At the airport, the whole crew came to see me off, Jonah carrying my bag. Sarah with a Tupperware of lemon bars. Clara clutching a drawing of our family under a rainbow that included a stick figure, Daniel with a tool belt. Lila hugged me longest, face buried in my shoulder. Call when you land, she said. I will. Daniel shook my hand, then pulled me into a hug that smelled of sawdust and coffee. Safe travels, Evelyn. Doors always open. I walked the jet bridge alone this time. The same plain smell, burnt coffee, recycled air, but softer now, like memory. I took my window seat, buckled in. Claire wasn't working this flight. A younger attendant smiled as she passed. The engines revved. Seattle fell away beneath us, green and gray and glistening. I pressed my palm to the window and whispered a promise to the clouds. I would be back. Not to fix, not to rescue, just to love. The napkin dragon fluttered in my purse. Ready for the next leg. The Chattanooga air hit me like a damp towel when I stepped off the Planethic. Sweet with late summer honeysuckle, the kind that clings to your skin and won't let go. I'd forgotten how loud the cicadas were, a wall of sound that rose and fell like breathing. My carry-on wheels rattled across the asphalt of the short-term lot where Ruth waited. leaning against her old Buick, arms crossed. Silver hair twisted into a knot that defied gravity. "You look like you've been through the wars," she said, by way of greeting. Popping the trunk. "I feel it." I lifted my bag in. The peach preserves had survived. But the good kind. She studied me over the rims of her glasses. "Lila, getting there." I climbed into the passenger seat. The vinyl was hot from the sun. I shifted, feeling the years in my hips. "I'll tell you on the way. First, I need to see my ferns." Ruth drove with one hand on the wheel, the other tapping ash from a cigarette she wasn't supposed to have. I cracked the window and let the wind whip my hair loose. We passed the Piggly Wiggly where the magazine had ambushed me. The rack was empty now, replaced by back-to-school flyers. I felt a small, satisfied click in my chest. Home smelled of dust and lemon oil. The ferns on the porch had drooped but not died. Alvarez next door had kept her promise. I watered them while Ruth put the kettle on. The kitchen table still bore the faint ring from Jonah's juice glass. I traced it with my thumb and felt the circle close. That night I slept 12 hours. Dreamless, the kind of sleep that stitches you back together. I woke to sunlight slanting through the gingham curtains and the smell of bacon drifting up the stairs. Ruth had stayed oversaid. She didn't trust me not to faint from emotional whiplash. She stood at the stove in my apron, flipping eggs with the same wrist flick our mother used. "Eat," she ordered, sliding a plate across. "Then you're calling that principal." "School starts Tuesday." I obeyed. The eggs were perfect, yolks runny, toast buttered to the edges. We ate on the porch, watching hummingbirds duel at the feeder. I told her everything: Fiji, the miscarriage, Mark's folded shoulders, Daniel's pancakes. She listened without interrupting, only raising an eyebrow when I got to the part about staying a week. "You're softer than you used to be," she said when I finished. "Maybe I'm just tired of being hard." She nodded, satisfied, and left me to my coffee. Monday, I went to the school. The hallways smelled of fresh wax and dry erase markers. My classroom door stood open. Someone had taped a welcome back banner across it in The Chattanooga air hit me like a damp towel when I stepped off the Planethic, sweet with latzimer, honeysuckle, the kind that clings to your skin and won't let go. I'd forgotten how loud the cicadas were, a wall of sound that rose and fell like breathing. My carry-on wheels rattled across the asphalt of the short-term lot where Ruth waited, leaning against her old Buick, arms crossed. Silver hair twisted into a knot that defied gravity. "You look like you've been through the wars," she said, by way of greeting. Popping the trunk. "I feel it." I lifted my bag in. The peach preserves had survived. But the good kind. She studied me over the rims of her glasses. "Lila, getting there." I climbed into the passenger seat. The vinyl was hot from the sun. I shifted, feeling the years in my hips. "I'll tell you on the way. First, I need to see my ferns." Ruth drove with one hand on the wheel, the other tapping ash from a cigarette she wasn't supposed to have. I cracked the window and let the wind whip my hair loose. We passed the Piggly Wiggly where the magazine had ambushed me. The rack was empty now, replaced by back-to-school flyers. I felt a small, satisfied click in my chest. Home smelled of dust and lemon oil. The ferns on the porch had drooped but not died. Mrs. Alvarez next door had kept her promise. I watered them while Ruth put the kettle on. The kitchen table still bore the faint ring from Jonah's juice glass. I traced it with my thumb and felt the circle close. That night I slept 12 hours. Dreamless, the kind of sleep that stitches you back together. I woke to sunlight slanting through the gingham curtains and the smell of bacon drifting up the stairs. Ruth had stayed oversaid. She didn't trust me not to faint from emotional whiplash. She stood at the stove in my apron, flipping eggs with the same wrist flick our mother used. "Eat," she ordered, sliding a plate across. "Then you're calling that principal. School starts Tuesday." I obeyed. The eggs were perfect, yolks runny, toast buttered to the edges. We ate on the porch, watching hummingbirds duel at the feeder. I told her everything: Fiji, the miscarriage, Mark's folded shoulders, Daniel's pancakes. She listened without interrupting, only raising an eyebrow when I got to the part about staying a week. "You're softer than you used to be," she said when I finished. "Maybe I'm just tired of being hard." She nodded, satisfied, and left me to my coffee. Monday, I went to the school. The hallways smelled of fresh wax and dry erase markers. My classroom door stood open. Someone had taped a welcome back banner across it in construction paper letters. Inside, the windowsills were Barano mason jars, yet I spent the day arranging desks into pods, sharpening pencils, writing names on cubby labels. Clara Harper, me granddaughter's name, stared back at me in purple marker. I smiled and taped a gold star beside it. Jonah called at lunch. "Kids want to FaceTime Aunt Leela tonight. You in? Wouldn't miss it." That evening, we gathered in my living room, Jonah, Sarah, the kids, me on the couch with my knitting. The laptop balanced on the coffee table. Lila's face filled the screen, pixelated for a second, then sharp. Behind her, the Ballard house looked settled, books on shelves. The ugly couch wearing a new slipcover the color of butter. "Hi, family," she said, waving. Daniel leaned in, sawdust in his hair. Clara shoved her drawing at the camera. "I made you a dragon, Uncle Daniel. It breathes lasagna." Daniel laughed, deep and easy. "My favorite flavor." We talked for an hour: school supplies, soccer practice, the fern that had revived overnight. Leela showed us the garden Daniel had started in the backyard, tomatoes already heavy on the vine. When Benjamin fell asleep against my shoulder, I shifted him gently and caught Leela's eye. "I'm proud of you," I said. Her smile wobbled. "I'm proud of us." Tuesday morning, the school bell rang at 8:05, same as always. 22 third graders tumbled in, sneakers squeaking, backpacks dragging. I stood at the door, greeting each by name, handing out name tags shaped like apples. The room smelled of crayons and nerves. When the pledge was done and the lunch count taken, I gathered them on the rug. "This year," I said, "we're going to learn about roots. Not math roots, Tao. We'll get to those, but the kind that hold you steady when storms come." I held up a mason jar filled with soil and a tiny oak seedling I'd started in the spring. "Some roots grow deep. Some spread wide. All of them matter." They leaned in, eyes round. I thought of Lila in Seattle, of Daniel's steady hands, of Mark's folded papers. I thought of the napkin dragon taped above my desk at home, wings spread. After school, I drove to the cemetery. Tom's stone was warm from the sun, the engraving worn soft at the edges. I set a small jar of peach preserves at the Bacino flowers. Just something he'd have eaten with a spoon straight from the jar. "I brought her back to me," I said to the granite. Not the way she was. Better. The wind carried my words into the oaks. I stayed until the shadows stretched long. Then drove home with the windows down, radio off. Cicadas singing me the rest of the way. Labor Day weekend, they came, Leela, Daniel, even Ruth, who insisted on riding with them to to keep the young people in line. The house overflowed. Clara and Benjamin slept in sleeping bags on my bedroom floor. Daniel took the couch without complaint. We grilled chicken on the back porch, corn still in the husk, peaches sliced over ice cream. Jonah and Daniel talked shop hardware versus aerospace while Sarah and Leela planned a cousin's sleepover for Christmas. That night, after the kids were asleep and the dishes done, Leela and I sat on the porch swing. The chain creaked in rhythm with the cicadas. Fireflies blinked across the yard like slow lightning. "I used to think growing up meant leaving you behind," she said, head on my shoulder. "Turns out it just means bringing you with me, in a different way." I kissed her hair. "Same goes for mothers." Daniel appeared in the doorway, holding 2 mugs. "Chamomile," he said, handing them over. "Figured you'd need it after wrangling grandkids all day." He settled on the step below us, back against the railing. The 3 of us sat in the dark, steam curling from our cups, the swing moving gentle. Somewhere inside, Ruth's snores rattled through an open window. I felt the old house breathe around oozla boards, memories, love worn into the grain. Leela broke the silence. "I'm keeping the Ballard house. But I want this one too. Weekends, holidays, roots." I squeezed her hand. "It's yours when you need it." Daniel looked up at the stars. "I've never had a porch swing. This one's got good bones." We laughed, soft so we wouldn't wake the house. The swing creaked on, carrying us forward and back, the way life does when you let it. Later, in bed, I listened to the quiet kids breathing, the tick of the grandfather clock, the faint murmur of Lila and Daniel talking through the wall. I thought of the flight attendant's whisper, the magazine aisle, the moment I refused to leave the plane. I thought of every small choice that led here, to this ordinary perfect night. The ferns on the porch would need water tomorrow. The biscuits would rise. The root steep and wide would hold.